Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today we're going to talk about all the major events that have transpired in the last month. Just after the turn of the new year, it has been a wild ride, and why it's important that everybody be more prepared now than they've ever been before. Let's get to it. I first want to send out my condolences to the many families who've been impacted by the many crises that we've bared witness to this year. It's very easy to look at these numbers going up and forget that these aren't numbers, that these are actually people with lives, family members, hopes, dreams, ambitions, who will be no longer able to see those through. I want to talk more about the outbreak later in the video, but I just want to put it all in perspective by doing a quick review of the events of 2020 thus far. A little over 2 months ago, I did a video entitled Warning: The World After 2020. In that video, I went over all the major challenges that humanity has ahead. I never thought that some of the things I talked about in that video would be unfolding so rapidly. So let's just go over what's happened in the first month of this new decade, because the system really has been skirting the line of failure, and the resilience of the system has really shown through this last month as we deal with political turmoil, geopolitical tensions, medical disasters, and a variety of climate anomalies. On January 23rd, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists moved the doomsday clock within 100 seconds of doomsday, the closest it has ever been. Now, while this is arguably a subjective measure of how close we are to Armageddon, the board of scientists who determine how far the needle gets moved are 13 Nobel laureates. This tick-tocking towards the apocalypse is owed to increased Middle East tensions, pandemics, climate calamities, and everything in between. So we started off the 2020s with Iran and the United States getting closer than they've ever been before to engaging in a full-scale conflict. By some stroke of luck, we were able to avert that situation. However, it is still ongoing and it is still escalating under the radar. So the now martyred Soleimani has been replaced by Ismail Khani, who, as predicted, has sworn to avenge the death of the former commander of the Iranian military. This situation cooled down precipitously after the unintentional shoot-down of a Ukrainian passenger flight. But even though the media quickly tired of this issue and turned its attention away from it, all the factors that led to the problem in the first place still remain unchanged. You still have the breakdown in nuclear talks between Iran and the United States, and with the most intense round of economic sanctions yet putting more and more pressure on the Iranian regime, signals that future confrontation is likely inevitable. Expect increased tensions with Israel and Saudi Arabia as proxy and economic war is waged across the region. Australia seen its highest temperatures ever recorded, its worst wildfires ever recorded, the worst drought ever recorded, 27 million acres burned, with some estimates of almost 1 billion animals who perished in these fires, thousands of homes destroyed, and dozens of fatalities. We've seen some outrageous weather across the board. Where I'm from, in the Great Plains here in Canada, we've had some wild weather extremes, with temperatures dipping down below -50 all the way up to +10 degrees, which is a record-breaking temperature. +10 degrees in January where I live is absolutely unheard of. We had a major snowstorm hit the northern east coast, which buried several towns in Newfoundland. To add to the climate chaos, Somalia, Pakistan, Ethiopia have all succumbed to some of the worst locust swarms in history. From the perspective of a Christian eschatologist, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are fast approaching in the rear view mirror. Not that I personally believe that, but it's undeniable that the system right now is being pressure tested on all fronts. We've seen the Hong Kong protests as a flashpoint for the clash between pro-democratic and pro-communist economic paradigms. The population of Hong Kong doesn't want to concede any of the democratic liberties it has gained in the last 50 years to an increasingly infringing Chinese government, which seeks to extradite people to that country for prosecution if they do something that the Chinese government doesn't like. Of course, this is a major infringement on the sovereignty of Hong Kong, which, in spite of it being a part of China, still has more autonomy that the people there have come to enjoy. This is going to become ever more important in the grand geopolitical scheme of things. These tensions are also carrying over into the current viral outbreak as Hong Kong healthcare workers are going on strike and demanding that Hong Kong closes the borders to China. As some of you know, Hong Kong has reported its first fatality due to the virus. In the United States, the political season is really starting to ratchet up. You have clashes between Second Amendment rights activists and the government. You have Antifa kicking up dirt in the streets. You have the ongoing impeachment process. And as I predicted last year, it looks more and more like we're going to see Trump versus Bernie come November. And I predicted this was going to be the case because of what I call the political pendulum, in that the political systems within our democracy seem to be oscillating from one extreme to the other, potentially culminating into some sort of civil clash of sorts. I don't think it's going to be a full-blown civil conflict, but we're likely going to see more populism and radicalization on both sides of the fence. I'm predicting that this is definitely going to be one of the most polarizing elections in US history. Now, if it wasn't enough, China also has to deal with another bird flu outbreak. This bird flu outbreak has occurred in the same province from which originated the virus, which is now affecting tens of thousands of people. Bird flu in humans is absolutely lethal with incredibly high fatality rates of up to 80%. Fortunately, there has been no transmission to humans and certainly no human-to-human transmission. Bird flu outbreaks are also increasingly becoming more common. Now, to top it all off, we have one of the biggest epidemics, if not possibly a pandemic, since the 1918 Spanish flu. This outbreak has prompted an unprecedented response from the Chinese government, signaling that the problem is probably far worse than their numbers are reflecting. These self-imposed quarantines and restrictions and travel bans to China have decimated the Chinese economy, and there is going to be a ripple effect in the US economy. Many companies are likely going to see significant first quarter losses as a result of the economic slowdown in China. China produces half of the stuff we use, and increasingly many companies are selling to China's consumer base. The effects of these interruptions in the supply chain alone may lead to shortages for certain commodities as well as rising prices. Once again, the system is being pressure tested. Now, if you weren't aware, most of the independent voices that are speaking about what's going on in China have been censored by the Chinese government themselves or essentially been deplatformed by the Western social media. So it's becoming increasingly harder to get to the root of what is actually going on there from both sides, because both sides seem to cherry pick the data that they want to share with the public. And what I mean by this is that it appears obvious to everybody, and it seems as though many mainstream newspapers like the New York Times are free to speculate that the infectious rate is far higher than the Chinese government is stating. But if any independent media becomes inquisitive at all or veers off the mainstream narrative of what is going on in terms of the numbers situation that China is providing us on a daily basis, then those people are deplatformed, demonetized, or demonized. But in my personal opinion, if I was to just step back from all of this for a second, and based on the hundreds of video clips I've seen but cannot share and the dozens of reports from people there on the ground, I think that the numbers that we're receiving are probably entirely useless because they're obviously only what's being counted as an illness. I'm guessing that both the fatalities and the infectious rates are much, much higher than we're being told. Now, I have heard from numerous sources that the way China is counting fatalities, if it's in any way similar to the way they count flu fatalities, then they may be drastically undercounting the amount of deaths. Because in China, if you pass away by flu complications, more often than not they'll mark that as death by pneumonia and won't chalk it up as an influenza mortality. If that's what they're doing in the case of this virus, then the numbers could be seriously off. So while myself and others have speculated that there's probably a lot of people who are not being counted, and thus the overall death rate may be much lower than expected, it may well be the case that a proportionate amount of deaths are not being attributed to the virus itself, meaning that this still could be far more lethal than the seasonal flu. There is no way that a country would take such drastic measures to contain a virus that had such a low fatality rate. I think that this is probably very bad. Now granted, for every person who's saying that this is going to spiral into an out-of-control pandemic, there's going to be 2 or 3 well-spoken, well-reasoned people who can provide you reasons with why this is probably going to be contained and why it's not going to pose a significant risk to the Western populations. But increasingly more and more, the pandemic word is getting thrown around a lot with certainty. We're starting to see more and more headlines that state that this is increasingly looking like a pandemic, and a pandemic is defined as basically an epidemic which is happening on 2 continents. Meaning that if this becomes pervasive in Europe or Oceania, the Middle East or Africa, then it essentially will constitute a pandemic. Now there have been several cases that were identified in India, and of course if this is now in India, it is going to spread like wildfire. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to shut down all of the traffic to India? Are you going to shut down all of the traffic to all the places that this starts to affect? What you're going to see is a global economic slowdown never before seen in history if you start to do that. And that's why if it goes along that path, it is not only going to just infect 2 continents, it inevitably is going to reach North America in much, much larger numbers. They are saying that this is probably not going to peak until April. The numbers appear to be, for the most part, going up logarithmically. I would argue that they're not quite going up exponentially as some people feared, and that is likely due to the fact that everybody is forced to stay inside in China. But we are increasingly hearing that many people are becoming more defiant to these rules, because either they're getting stir crazy or they're running out of supplies and they're being forced to go outside again. And that Maoist style of communism is really starting to rear its ugly head in China once again as they start to crack down on people who are not wearing masks, who are not following the quarantine orders. So I get the sense that China and much of the rest of the world is probably just going to ride this out until they can find a vaccine, which is then going to be viewed as the Holy Grail. And of course, there's going to be all sorts of political turmoil in crossing that bridge once we get there. One thing that's really been annoying me lately is people comparing this to the flu. You're not Einstein if you're posting the comment of how the flu takes the lives of so many people every year and why we shouldn't be concerned about this. Number one, it does not take much to overwhelm our healthcare systems. I tried to make that point in the last video, but apparently a lot of people just started typing before they even watched the video. It does not take much to overwhelm our healthcare system. Even a 5% uptake, never mind the 500 to 1,000% increase you're going to see in hospital visitations if you have a situation like this, is going to totally overwhelm the system. There's a lot of people out there who choose to think one-dimensionally about these things. They fail to recognize that the treatment of the flu is something which is built in and factored into the system. It's a certainty. That's why we have as many hospitals as we do, because those hospitals expect those statistical numbers of people to visit the hospitals every year for flu and other things which are predictable. If you throw anything like this that's extra into the mix, it immediately overwhelms the system. Go to the ER on a Saturday night and not be in critical condition and see how long it takes for you to be seen. Then come back with the, oh, it's not as bad as the flu yet criticism. But what's worse is that apparently there's some people who just don't understand simple mathematics. They don't understand what a pandemic is. China would not be quarantining whole cities and isolating themselves from the rest of the world in global trade, decimating their own economy over something that was only as bad as the flu. This is far more infectious and thus has the potential to be orders of magnitude more lethal. So please stop thinking you are smart and writing comments like, oh, more people choke on peanuts or die from peanut allergies every year, because you have absolutely no idea what you are talking about. Now, on the flip side of that, I don't think this is a harbinger for the end of days, and I do think a lot of people go too far in terms of viewing this as a near apocalyptic or civilization ending scenario. It's not going to be that bad. I've emphasized this on all the videos that I've done on the topic, that this will at some point be contained and life will go back to normal, but that we should use this as a trial run for a real pandemic which may well afflict humanity, as many virologists and epidemiologists have been saying that we are long overdue to experience. So in summary, folks, we are living in the age of consequences. We are living in a transitional period of the human race where it's going to be make or break. We're at the crossroads of massive technological innovation which is going to revolutionize the way the world works, It's going to revolutionize the economy. It's going to revolutionize the way that we feed ourselves, the way we live together, our living standards. And right now we find ourselves right in the intersection of those crossroads. So this is the most critical time to be prepared. Have ample supplies of food and water on hand, so if the situation does get bad, you can be self-sufficient if the pandemic does make its way this way. I really want to focus on other videos. I had so many winter videos planned, and actually they're already half done, but I just haven't wanted to release them because everybody's attention is on these real-world events that are transpiring right now. And so there's no point in me releasing these videos when everybody's on edge about the outbreak. But hopefully, if these things calm down, I can start getting those videos out mid to late February, because I really do gotta get out to the bush, gotta do some camping. I gotta get back to nature, sit around a campfire, ground myself, and just forget about all this stuff for a while before it drives me batty. So stay ready, focus on your preps. I'm going to post a link to a how to start prepping video. If you are a new subscriber, go check that video out. I'll also post my video to pandemic preparedness. Expect at least one more pandemic related video in the next week here that deals with more advanced pandemic preparedness supplies. That's going to be coming out in a couple days. Alright guys, everybody stay safe, make sure to wash your hands. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy the video. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com. Your one-stop shop for premium, high-quality, brand-name products that have been tried and tested by myself and other YouTube gear reviewers. My subscribers save 10% off by using the coupon code SURVIVALPREPPER. All one word in all caps.